I came home from my shift at the Veterans Affairs Hospital to find a lockbox on my front door and a for sale sign planted in my small front yard. My condo, the one I'd lived in for 4 years, was apparently on the market. I tried my key. It still worked, thankfully. Inside, I found evidence of a showing. Business cards on the kitchen counter, the furniture rearranged, and a staging guide left on my coffee table noting remove personal items for better buyer appeal. My personal items. In my home. I called my mother. "Oh good, you saw the sign," Mom answered cheerfully. "We wanted to tell you first, but your father was so excited he just went ahead and listed it. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't what wonderful? That we're selling the condo. The market's perfect right now. Your dad's realtor friend says we can get at least $425,000, maybe more with the right buyer." I sat down slowly on my couch. The couch someone had moved 3 feet to the left for better flow. "Mom, why are you selling my condo?" "Well, it's not exactly yours, dear. It's the family's. Your grandmother's death benefit paid for it, so really it belongs to all of us. And right now, your sister needs the money more than you need all this space." My grandmother's death benefit. My grandmother, a decorated Army nurse who'd served in Vietnam, whose survivor benefits had gone to me, her only grandchild who'd followed her into military service. "What does Jessica need money for?" I asked carefully. "Her wedding, of course. And the honeymoon in Bali and the down payment on a house with Trent. The wedding alone is costing $60,000. Your father and I simply can't cover all of it, so we're selling the condo. You can find an apartment. You're single with no children. You don't need 2 bedrooms. I'm a veteran with a disability rating living in VA-subsidized housing," I said quietly. "Oh, that disability thing. Darling, you look fine. I'm sure you can work full-time once you're in a smaller place and feeling motivated. Living in such a nice condo has made you complacent." My disability thing was a traumatic brain injury and PTSD from my deployment in Afghanistan. My complacency was working 30 hours a week as a medical coordinator at the VA hospital while managing chronic migraines and anxiety attacks. But my parents had never really understood that. "When did you list the condo?" I asked. "This morning. We've already had 3 showings. Your father's so proud, he's handling it himself since he just got his real estate license last month. He's been studying so hard. Dad got his real estate license and decided his first listing would be my home. We have a showing at 6 tonight," Mom continued. "Can you make sure you're not there? It's harder to sell when the current occupant is home. And dear, maybe take those military photos off the wall. Buyers prefer neutral decor." The military photos included my grandmother in her uniform, my platoon from Afghanistan, and the commendation I'd received for evacuating wounded soldiers under fire. "I need to talk to Dad," I said. "He's with a potential buyer right now. But he'll call you later. Oh, and Kennedy, start packing. Your father's optimistic we'll have an offer by next week. You'll want to be ready to move quickly." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there for a long moment, then opened my laptop and pulled up my housing file. The one I kept meticulously organized because navigating VA benefits required documentation of everything. My condo wasn't just any property. It was purchased through the VA's Specially Adapted Housing Grant, a federal program for disabled veterans. The grant had covered $101,216 of the purchase price. The property deed had specific restrictions and protections attached. My parents apparently had no idea about any of this. I called the VA housing coordinator, a woman named Patricia who'd helped me navigate the grant process 4 years ago. "Patricia, it's Kennedy Mitchell. I need help. My parents just listed my SAH property for sale without authorization." Her response was immediate and sharp. "They did what?" "For sale sign in the yard, lockbox on the door showing scheduled. My father just got his real estate license and decided to sell my condo. Does he understand it's federally protected housing? I don't think he knows it's protected at all. My mother thinks it was purchased with my grandmother's death benefit. Kennedy, this is serious. Unauthorized sale attempts of SAH properties are federal violations." "Who's the listing agent?" "My father, Robert Mitchell. He got his license last month." "Give me 30 minutes. Don't agree to anything, don't sign anything, and definitely don't move out." Hold up. 30 minutes later, my doorbell rang. A couple in their 40s stood on my porch, the woman holding a folder. Hi. We're here for the 6 o'clock showing? I'm Diane, this is my husband Paul. Is the listing agent here yet? There's been a mistake, I said. This property isn't actually for sale. Oh, but we saw it online. Robert Mitchell is the agent. He sent us the door code for the lockbox. She held up her phone showing the listing. I looked at the screen. There was my living room photographed this morning while I was at work. Listed price, $435,000. Agent, Robert Mitchell, Prestige Realty. Description, charming 2-bed, 2-bath condo perfect for first-time buyers or investors. No mention of the VA grant. No mention of the federal restrictions. No mention that the seller was illegally attempting to sell his daughter's protected housing. I'm sorry you made the trip, I said. But this is my home and it's not for sale. My father made an error. Paul frowned. An error? We've been pre-qualified for a mortgage. This is the third property we've looked at this week. I understand, but the listing is unauthorized. I'm the legal owner and I never agreed to sell. Diane's expression shifted from confused to annoyed. Is this some kind of scam? We could report this. You should report it, I said. To the state real estate board. The listing agent doesn't have authority to sell this property. They left, Diane already on her phone, probably calling their buyer's agent to complain. 20 minutes later my father arrived, his face red. Kennedy, what the hell did you just do? Diane Stevens called my broker saying you told them the condo isn't for sale. Do you know how embarrassing that is? More or less embarrassing than illegally listing your daughter's federally protected housing without her consent? He stopped. What are you talking about? Dad, sit down. We need to have a conversation you should have had before planting a for sale sign in my yard. He sat reluctantly on my rearranged couch. This condo wasn't purchased with Grandma's death benefit, I began. It was purchased using a VA specially adapted housing grant. Do you know what that is? Some kind of veteran housing thing? It's a federal grant program for disabled veterans. The government provided $101,216 toward the purchase price. In exchange, the property has permanent restrictions and protections. What kind of restrictions? The kind that mean you can't sell it without VA approval. The kind that require the property to be my primary residence as long as I need adapted housing. The kind that make unauthorized sale attempts a federal violation. Dad's face was getting paler. But you're the owner. You can sell whenever you want. I'm the owner, yes. You're not. And even I can't sell without going through the VA's approval process, notifying them of my intent and getting clearance. You definitely can't sell it. But your mother said. Mom was wrong. Grandma's survivor benefit went into my general savings. The condo was purchased through a completely separate federal program. I already have showings scheduled, Dad said weakly. 3 more tomorrow. You need to cancel them. And remove the listing immediately. Kennedy, be reasonable. Jessica needs this money. Her wedding is in 3 months. Revelation. Jessica needs money for a $60,000 wedding, so you're trying to illegally sell my disability housing? It's not illegal. I'm a licensed real estate agent now. I can list properties. You can list properties you have legal authority to sell. This isn't one of them. My phone rang. Patricia from the VA. Kennedy, I've reviewed your case. I'm conferencing in our legal department. A man's voice joined the call. Ms. Mitchell, this is David Chin, VA Housing Legal Division. Can you confirm that your property at 847 Riverside Drive, Unit 12, has been listed for sale without your authorization? Yes. My father listed it this morning. And your father is Robert Mitchell, newly licensed with Prestige Realty? That's correct. Is he present now? He's sitting right here. Can you put this on speaker? I did. Dad looked confused and increasingly nervous. Mr. Mitchell, this is David Chin with the Department of Veterans Affairs Legal Division. I'm calling about your unauthorized listing of federally protected housing at 847 Riverside Drive. Dad's voice came out strangled. I didn't know it was protected. The property was purchased using a specially adapted housing grant. The deed restrictions are public record and clearly note the federal protections. Did you review the deed before listing? Silence. Mr. Mitchell? No. My daughter owned it, so I assumed I could list it for the family. Your daughter owns it. You have no legal relationship to the property. Your attempt to sell it without authorization violates federal housing protection laws and constitutes real estate fraud. Fraud. Dad's voice cracked. You listed and attempted to sell property you have no authority to sell, misrepresenting your right to act as listing agent. That's fraud. Additionally, you failed to disclose the federal restrictions to potential buyers, which violates state real estate regulations. I didn't know about the restrictions. Ignorance isn't a defense, particularly for a licensed agent. You're required to conduct due diligence before listing any property. Patricia's voice joined in. Mr. Mitchell, I'm required to file a report with both the State Real Estate Commission and federal housing authorities. The commission will investigate whether your license should be suspended. Suspended. Dad stood up. Over a misunderstanding? Over an illegal attempt to sell federal housing, Patricia corrected. Kennedy, I need to verify. Did you authorize any showings or give your father permission to list? No. I came home to find a sign in my yard and a lockbox on my door. Did you receive any proceeds or sign any documentation? Nothing. I learned about the listing from my mother. David Chin spoke again. Mr. Mitchell, you need to remove the listing immediately and cancel all scheduled showings. You need to contact every potential buyer or agent who viewed the property and inform them the listing was unauthorized. And you need to retain a lawyer because the state board will be contacting you about your license. This is insane, Dad said. I was trying to help my family. You were trying to sell your daughter's home without her permission, Patricia said coldly. There's nothing helpful about that. After they hung up, Dad sat heavily on the couch, his face in his hands. Kennedy, you have to fix this. Fix what? Call them back. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave me permission. I didn't give you permission. But Jessica's wedding is not my responsibility and definitely doesn't justify you trying to sell my home. You're really going to let them suspend my license over this? You're really going to pretend you did nothing wrong? He looked up at me, anger replacing panic. I spent 2 months studying for that license. I took the exam 3 times. This was supposed to be my second career. Then maybe you should have learned what due diligence means before listing your first property. This is your fault, he said suddenly. If you'd just told us about the VA grant, none of this would have happened. I did tell you. When I bought the condo 4 years ago, I explained the whole process. You said, that's nice, and changed the subject to Jessica's college graduation. I don't remember that. I know. You don't remember a lot of things about my service or my disability because they're not as important to you as Jessica's life milestones. Resolution. He stood up. Your mother is going to be devastated. Jessica's counting on this money. Then Jessica needs a less expensive wedding. And you need to call your broker and explain what happened before they find out from the state board. You really won't help me? I really won't lie to federal authorities to cover up your illegal listing of my disability housing. No. He left without another word. Mom called 10 minutes later, crying. Kennedy, how could you do this to your father? His license is being investigated. He could lose everything. He tried to sell my home without permission, Mom. What did you think would happen? We were trying to help Jessica. Don't you care about your sister's happiness? I care about Jessica. I don't care about funding a $60,000 wedding by making myself homeless. You're not homeless. You can get an apartment. This is my home. Adapted for my disability. Protected by federal law specifically so people can't do what you and Dad tried to do. We didn't try to do anything wrong. You tried to sell property you don't own that you had no right to list without the owner's consent. That's literally the definition of wrong. She hung up on me. Over the next week, several things happened quickly. Dad removed the listing and canceled the showings. 3 potential buyers filed complaints with Prestige Realty. His broker suspended him pending the state investigation. The State Real Estate Commission opened a formal inquiry into his license. And the VA legal department sent a formal letter to my parents explaining that any future interference with my housing would result in federal charges. Jessica called on Saturday furious. You ruined everything. Mom and Dad were going to give me $100,000 from the condo sale. Now I have to scale back the entire wedding. Jessica, they were going to make me homeless to fund your destination wedding. You could have just moved. It's not like you need that much space. It's adapted housing for my disability. It's protected by federal law. Your fake disability that you used to avoid working full-time, you mean? I hung up on her. Dad's preliminary hearing with the state board happened 3 weeks later. Patricia from the VA testified about federal housing protections and the illegality of Dad's listing. The buyers who'd been misled testified about being shown a property under false pretenses. The board suspended Dad's license for 6 months and required him to complete additional training on property law and ethics before reinstatement. Mom called me afterward. I hope you're happy. Your father's career is ruined. My father's brand new second career hit a speed bump because he didn't do basic due diligence before trying to sell his daughter's home. We were trying to help Jessica. You were trying to sacrifice my housing to fund Jessica's wedding. That's not help. That's favoritism. We've always treated you girls equally. You literally tried to sell my home to pay for Jessica's party. That's the opposite of equal. She didn't have a response to that. 2 months later, Jessica had her wedding. Scaled back significantly, local venue, half the guest list, no Bali honeymoon. She didn't invite me. Neither did my parents. I didn't mind. I spent that weekend painting my living room in my condo that was still mine because federal law had protected it when my own family wouldn't. Patricia from the VA called to check in. How are you holding up? Better than expected. Turns out boundaries feel good once you establish them. Your parents still not speaking to you? Not really. They sent a Christmas card to current resident, at my address, so that's something. She laughed. You did the right thing, Kennedy. Standing up for your housing rights protects not just you but every veteran in adapted housing. Thanks, Patricia. For everything. After we hung up, I walked through my condo. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, wide doorways for wheelchair access I didn't currently need but might someday. A roll-in shower adapted for my worst migraine days when standing was impossible. My home. Purchased with a federal grant designed to honor my service and accommodate my disability. Protected by laws that valued my housing security over my family's wedding budget. Dad had thought he could sell it because family needed money more than I needed space. Instead, he'd learned that federal housing protections exist precisely to prevent families from doing what he'd tried to do. His license was suspended. His second career delayed. His relationship with me permanently changed. All because he'd planted a for sale sign in my yard without asking if he had the right. I took down the last business card left by a confused buyer and threw it away. My home. My rights. My boundaries finally enforced. Exactly as the law intended.
They threw me a birthday party the week they decided to erase me. It wasn't extravagant, just a chocolate cake from the grocery store. 8 candles poked in unevenly and 2 balloons taped to the kitchen chairs. Mom hummed as she sliced the cake. Dad patted my head and told me to make a wish. He didn't look at me when he said it. I remember that I wished for a dog. Not because I wanted one, I just didn't know what else to ask for. Things had been quiet at home for weeks. Mom stopped picking me up from school, and Dad barely spoke to me unless it was to tell me to clean something. I thought maybe they were just tired, or maybe I had done something wrong without realizing it. 2 days later, I walked into the hallway and saw my duffel bag zipped up and sitting by the front door. My shoes were tucked beside it. I knew then, before they even said a word, that something was ending. Mom called it an opportunity. You'll be staying with Aunt Geneva for a little while, she said, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. It's not punishment, Dad added. I didn't ask if I had a choice. I just stood there. I think that made it easier for them. We had dinner like it was a normal Tuesday. Spaghetti with garlic bread. Mom asked if I wanted more Parmesan. I nodded, even though I wasn't hungry. She sprinkled it over my plate like everything was fine. Later that night, I watched her pack a final item into my bag, a pair of old sneakers I had outgrown months ago. She didn't ask what I wanted to bring. She just zipped the bag and set it back by the door. The next morning, we drove to Louisiana to Aunt Geneva's farm. No music in the car. No talking. When we pulled into the driveway, Mom said, "We'll check in soon." Then she hugged me with one arm and got back in the car. They were gone before Geneva opened the front door. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood on the porch holding the bag that was too heavy for an 8-year-old. I could hear cows in the distance. The air smelled like soil and dust and something unfamiliar. Geneva didn't say much either. She just took my bag and told me where the guest room was. That night, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if the birthday balloon was still floating in the corner of our kitchen back home. If it was, it probably lasted longer than I did. The hallway smelled like lemon polish and something older, old paper, old carpet, old silence. It was cleaner than I remembered. Not better, just cleaner, like someone had gone through it with bleach but couldn't scrub out the history. The picture frames were still up. Same crooked angles, same fingerprints on the glass. Except now there were two girls in the photos. One of them I didn't recognize. The other was me, digitally edited into moments I never lived. There I was, at a beach I never saw, at a school play I never attended. My smile pasted over someone else's weekend. I stood there for a full minute staring at one frame above the heater vent. Christmas, maybe 6 years ago, Tessa, holding a stocking, my father wearing his forced grin. My mother beside them, hand on Tessa's back, and next to them me, a blurry outline, too tall, too still. The photo had been doctored but poorly. They hadn't even tried to match the light. They hadn't erased me. They'd replaced me. I was 8 when my mother got pregnant with Tessa. I didn't understand what it meant. Not at first. She stopped talking about things I liked, stopped asking if I needed help with homework, stopped packing the lunches I liked, and started handing me cafeteria money, even though we both knew I never used it. I wasn't trouble, not exactly, but I had a limp from an accident. I couldn't even remember. I walked uneven, and she said it made me look like something's wrong. She didn't say it mean. She said it quiet, like a diagnosis. One afternoon, I came home to find my small blue suitcase zipped and upright in the living room. My favorite socks were inside. So were the 2 paperbacks I'd read over and over. There was a note on top, "Be good for Aunt Margot." That night, I sat in the back seat of my father's car as we drove to the next town. He didn't speak the whole ride except once when I asked if I could come home on weekends. "We'll see how it goes," he said. They stayed 5 minutes at Aunt Margot's. She made hot cocoa. My mother declined. My father said, "We'll call you soon." They never did, but every December a card showed up in Margot's mailbox. "To our dearest Eliza," it read, a photo printed on cheap gloss paper. Always the 3 of them smiling and matching sweaters. On the back in my mother's hand, "Still a part of us." I stopped opening them when I turned 13, but Margot kept each one in a shoebox. Just in case you want to remember who they said they were. I walked past the picture wall and opened the linen closet. Inside, on the highest shelf, was a small pair of brown leather shoes, scuffed narrow, slightly uneven at the sole. The ones I wore the day they left me behind. I reached up and took them down, cradling them like something alive. Then I smiled quietly. So they hadn't thrown them out after all, just tucked them away like they did with me. The first few weeks with Aunt Margot were mostly quiet. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry. She just made dinner and made space. She left a lamp on in the hallway outside my room and pretended it was for herself. I didn't speak much that first month. Words had always gotten me in trouble, too loud, too emotional, too needy. So I kept to the rhythms I knew. Wake early, keep out of the way, don't take the last piece of bread. That was a rule in my house growing up. Leave something behind. Don't be the one who finishes things. Margot noticed the way I flinched when the kettle whistled, the way I didn't hang my clothes in the closet, just folded them into the corners of drawers. She never asked why. Instead, she gave me a drawer in the kitchen that was mine. Just mine. She even wrote my name on the inside in pencil, Eliza Spoons. It sounds silly now, but that drawer felt more permanent than any birthday card my parents ever sent. By the time I was 12, I was working weekends at the corner florist. Petals and Ferns sat at the edge of town, run by a woman named Dottie, who wore denim overalls and always smelled like lavender and rainwater. She taught me how to arrange sympathy wreaths, how to talk to grieving husbands, and how to mix bleach into flower buckets to keep bacteria from blooming. "You're quiet," she said. "Once I'm used to it," I answered. She nodded, like that made sense, and she never pushed me to be louder. At 14, I was doing invoices. At 16, I was closing the shop on Sunday nights. I saved every dollar, tucked it into an old metal tin I kept behind my textbooks. The first thing I bought with my own money was a second-hand winter coat, forest green wool with deep pockets. The second thing I bought was a locked fireproof box. I wasn't sure why, I just knew I didn't want certain things lost in a house fire. In it, I placed the old birthday cards from Margot, a photo of me and her on a picnic blanket, and one thing I never touched but never threw away. A tiny gold pin in the shape of a tulip. It had been mine, a gift from my mother on my 5th birthday. She called me her little flower that year. The next year, she forgot my birthday entirely. At school, I did well. Quiet students make easy students. I never skipped class. I never raised my hand unless I was sure Margot would write my name in the corner of grocery lists just to make sure I'd see it. You exist, those scribbles seemed to say. Someone remembers you're here. By the time I was 18, I had a full scholarship to state college. I commuted from home, worked weekends at the florist, studied business and accounting. Margot offered to help with rent if I wanted to move out, but I told her I liked hearing the kettle in the morning. I didn't tell her the truth. I still slept with my shoes beside my bed. Toes pointed toward the door, just in case someone said again, "You don't belong here." The house felt louder now. Backyard laughter layered with folding chairs, paper plates, and the soundtrack of a family pretending everything was fine. Tessa's birthday banners fluttered along the back fence. The tables were covered in peach-colored cloths. A photo display leaned against the shed. Baby pictures, dance recitals, first days of school. She looked like the center of a world that revolved around her. I stood just outside the archway of balloons. No one noticed me at first. They were too busy clinking soda cans and talking over each other. The kind of chaos that feels normal when you think the past is buried. Then my mother saw me. She was wearing pale blue linen and holding a tray of deviled eggs. Her hand froze mid-step. Her face tried to decide which emotion to land on. "Eliza," she said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. My name rippled outward, heads turned. My father stood under the shade umbrella, squinting like I was a trick of the light. Tessa looked up from a gift bag, confused. "Who's that?" My mother's mouth opened closed, then settled on a brittle smile. "That's your sister." There was no warmth in it, no reunion, just facts packaged for convenience. Tessa frowned. "I don't have a sister." A pause. I stepped closer, slow and quiet, until I stood on the edge of their perfect tableau. "No," I said. "You have a record of one." My father cleared his throat. "We didn't expect you. So soon, I know." I left a message. I know. There were maybe 40 people present, neighbors, co-workers, extended family. None of them moved, but the silence thickened, the kind where no one wants to be first. I reached into my shoulder bag and pulled out the envelope. It looked so small now, this thing I had folded and refolded for months, worn at the corners but sealed. I held it out toward my mother. She hesitated, then took it like she thought it might burn her. "What is this?" "You asked me to come," I said softly. "To show people you raised a good daughter." She blinked. "Well," I added, "here's what that daughter brought." She didn't open it, just clutched it like a prop. My father was still frozen. Tessa tilted her head, impatient. "Why's she here?" she asked again. "It's my birthday." I turned to her, studied her face. "You're 12 now," I said gently. "That's the same age I was in the photo your mom keeps on the hallway wall. You know, the one where I'm smiling next to her and your dad." She nodded slowly. "I wasn't there," I told her. "They added me in." Gasps weren't audible, but the quiet got louder. A man I didn't recognize leaned toward his wife. Someone else dropped their fork. My mother shifted on her heels. "I didn't come to ruin your party," I said. "I came because I got tired of being edited into a family that never wanted me in the frame." I let the words sit there. Tessa stared, unsure whether to cry or roll her eyes. My mother glanced around nervously, the envelope still clutched in her hand like a mistake she couldn't return. I turned, walked toward the sliding glass doors, and let myself into the house. The smell hit me first. Old carpet citrus cleaner and something like denial. I didn't slam the door, I didn't need to. Everyone heard me leave anyway. The kitchen hadn't changed, same ceramic rooster by the stove, same chipped tile by the sink. Even the smell was the same lemon oil and something just slightly burnt, like scorched toast or old secrets. I set my bag on the counter and opened it slowly like unwrapping something dangerous. The envelope I handed my mother was only part of what I brought. Inside my bag were printed emails, postmarked cards, a copy of the photo they photoshopped me into, and the school letter that gave them away. That was the moment everything shifted. It came in the mail by accident, addressed to Mrs. Eliza Merrill, congratulating me for academic achievement in business management. My college had sent it to the address on file, my childhood address. Their address. I never told them where I studied. I never told them anything. So when I called the college office, they said, "Oh yes, your mother updated the contact info last year, said it was for our alumni newsletter." She never told me, but she kept the letters, she kept the headlines, she kept the parts of me she could claim in front of strangers. I placed the letter on the counter face up. Then I laid down a copy of the Christmas card she sent to extended family 2 years ago. Tessa in the snow. Dad on the porch and me again in the corner, the same photo from the hallway, the same fake light on my face. They told people I was busy, that I traveled a lot, that Eliza's off doing amazing things. We're so proud. They never called me, not once. Outside, the party sounds had quieted to murmurs. Someone was standing near the screen door. I could feel it. I turned and opened it. It was Aunt Claire, my mother's older sister. She looked tired but sharp, holding a glass of lemonade and a wrinkled brow. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought you were in school abroad. That's what they said." I nodded. I was. "Just not the way they told it." She stepped inside. "Do you want me to stay?" "No," I said gently, "but thank you for asking." I walked back into the living room. It was mostly empty now. A few guests lingered by the hallway, unsure whether they were still supposed to smile or pretend not to hear. My mother stood in the doorway, pale, and pinched the envelope now open in her hands. My father followed behind her slower. He had that look men get when they think they still control the ending, when they think silence will save them. I laid one last page on the coffee table, a transcript from the local church bulletin 5 years ago, where she gave a testimony at a family panel. She said, "Raising girls is hard, but we're lucky we've been through trials, but both our daughters make us proud. Even our eldest Eliza, who lives out of state but never forgets to call." She never gave me that quote. She gave it to the church. Tessa was now at the edge of the room, watching. She looked less angry now, more curious. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "You lived here." I met her eyes. "I used to," I said. "But they didn't want 2 daughters, just one. They could get right." My mother flinched. "That's not fair." I nodded. I agree. It wasn't. Then I picked up the gold tulip pin, the one I'd worn to kindergarten, the one she gave me when she still braided my hair, and set it beside the papers I brought. "Everything you left behind," I said. "Everything you pretended not to lose." There was no yelling, no dramatic collapse. Just silence, the kind that can't be fixed with cake or balloons. As I turned to leave, my mother reached out, reflex more than intent. "Eliza," she said. I paused. "Don't call me that." "Not today." I walked toward the front door, each step slower than the last, and behind me, for the first time in 12 years, no one told me to stop. The front steps creaked the same way they used to. 3 boards in, there was a soft sag under the right foot. I stepped over it without thinking. Muscle memory. Even after 12 years, I didn't rush. "Let them watch." Aunt Margot once told me that the most powerful people in a room are the ones who can leave without explaining themselves. Back then, I thought it was something people said to sound strong. Now I understand it's the only way to survive. People who rewrite you at the bottom of the steps. I paused. The porch railing still had that old ceramic frog I made in 2nd grade, its paint flaking eyes uneven. They'd kept it maybe for decoration, maybe for guilt. I didn't care. I reached into my bag one last time and took out the shoes. Small, worn brown leather with the uneven sole, the pair I wore the day they sent me away. I didn't look around, just bent down and placed them beside the frog side by side, heels touching the wood. Not dramatic, not symbolic, just true. Then I straightened up and walked down the driveway toward the street. A few cars were still parked along the curb. Some guests had already left. Some never knew what happened. Halfway to the end of the block, I heard the door open behind me. "Eliza," my mother's voice. Not shouted, just shaken. I didn't turn, not out of anger, not out of pride, just because I'd already answered everything I came to answer. She called again, softer this time. "Eliza, wait." I slowed, not stopped, just slowed. She needed to say it. I needed not to hear it. In my pocket was the name change form I hadn't filed yet. Not because I doubted it, but because part of me wanted to say goodbye, first to the name, not the people, to the child who waited 12 years for someone to call her home. And now that someone had, Not to welcome her, but to display her. To borrow her existence for social credit, I walked until the house disappeared behind hedges and telephone poles, until the smell of party food faded and the sounds were just distant murmurs. Then I turned onto Maple Avenue and kept walking, past the mailbox with our old family name on it, past the park where no one ever took me, past the grocery store where Margot once let me pick any cereal I wanted, and I stood there for 20 minutes because no one had ever asked me that before, and eventually past the line where my history ended and my life began. Back at her house, I brewed tea in the quiet. The old kettle still whistled. The lamp still clicked on by itself at sunset. I sat down, placed the empty envelope on the kitchen table, and wrote one final line on the back. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. What you lost was the right to say I was ever yours. Then I folded it and slipped it into the fireproof box right beside the tulip pin. I didn't feel triumphant, just still. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Mom said she wanted to talk about flowers. You've got the eye, honey, she told me on the phone. Come by this Sunday. We'll have coffee, look at bouquets, and Natalie might join us too. I should have known right then. My mom, Susan, never says anything directly when it's important. And whenever she brings up Natalie casually like a bonus prize included in the invite, it usually means I'm walking into something loaded. So I drove back to the house I grew up in. White shutters wind Chime's porch swing that hasn't swung since Dad broke the chain 2 summers ago. He was out front when I pulled in trimming the hedges like he does every Sunday. That's Frank, my dad. Quiet, deliberate, never the first to speak, but always watching. Hey, kid, he said with a half smile, then went back to clipping. Inside the kitchen smelled like lemon and coffee grounds. Mom hugged me at the door. You look tired, Hannah. Are you eating enough? I'm fine, Mom. Then there she was, Natalie, my sister. 32, gorgeous, always a little undone on purpose. She was sitting at the kitchen table flipping through a magazine. Not mine, not a bridal catalog. Something arty European looking. She didn't say hi. We sat down for sandwiches. No mayo, Mom remembers I hate mayo. Mark, my fiancé, jokes that I hate moist food and he's not wrong. Susan made her usual small talk asking about the caterer, the color scheme, whether we'd considered fairy lights for the barn beams. Then Natalie spoke. I was thinking, she said, eyes on her magazine. Maybe we could combine our events. I paused. What events? She looked up at me, that practiced wide-eyed face she's always used when she's about to ask for something big. My launch, she said. The collective, healing and art. We're renting a space soon, but the timing's tricky and people are hard to reach. But a wedding, it's perfect. A built-in audience. I looked at her, then at Mom, then at the napkin I was folding, then refolding. It wouldn't take away from your day, sweetheart, Mom added quickly. Just a short presentation. Natalie could hang a few pieces, maybe do a reading. Natalie smiled like she'd just suggested a toast, not a hijack. Mark loves art, she said. It could be beautiful, symbolic. I didn't say anything right away. My fingers found the edge of my coffee cup, still warm. I took a breath. Natalie, I said. This is my wedding. I know she said too fast. That's why it matters. It would mean something, Hannah. After everything I need this. That was the part that stung. After everything. After Italy. After she dropped out of design school 2 years in, and Mom flew out to support her creativity. After the divorce, the debt, the years she stayed in our childhood bedroom while I was renting a basement room 2 towns over. And now she needed my wedding too. I stood up. No, I said. Mom looked stunned. Dad stayed quiet. Natalie finally blinked. And me, I just picked up my purse and walked out the same door I came in. I didn't go home right away after leaving Mom's house. I drove around for an hour past the old middle school, the park where Natalie used to hold court like a little queen, and finally pulled into the grocery store parking lot. Just sat there, windows rolled down, hands clenched on the steering wheel. Funny thing is, I wasn't even angry. Not exactly. It was that old feeling again, tightness behind my ribs, like I was 12 years old watching everyone at the dinner table laugh at Natalie's story while I cleared the plates. That kind of ache doesn't burn. It just settles in and stays. Natalie was always the center of the room. When we were kids, Mom Susan used to say, "Your sister has a gift, Hannah. People notice her." And they did. And when she messed up, skipped class, snapped at teachers, forgot birthdays, well, people made room for that too. I was the quiet one, the good girl, the one who cleaned up after the show. I remember once I got a perfect score on a science project. Built the whole thing myself. Dad Frank helped me carry it to school. That night at dinner, I waited for Mom to say something, but she didn't, because Natalie had missed the bus, and apparently that was more interesting. That's the kind of stuff you don't bring up as an adult, because it sounds petty, but when it piles up year after year, it turns into something else, something heavy. And when I got my first full-time job, I started sending Mom and Dad money every month. They never asked. But I knew about this second mortgage, the one they took out to send Natalie to Florence for fashion school. I didn't want them to lose the house. It wasn't charity. It was duty. Family. At least that's what I told myself. That night, after circling the block a few more times, I went home and sat down with Mark. He was at the kitchen table sorting through RSVP cards, humming something off-key. He looked up when I dropped my purse and said, "Well, that was fast." I told him everything. When I got to the part about the healing collective, he raised both eyebrows. "You're kidding. I wish." Then I told him about how Mom backed it, about how Natalie made it sound like I owed her this stage. He didn't say anything right away. He just reached over, slid his hand into mine, and said, "So, what do we do?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm cutting off the payments." Mark blinked. "To your parents? They're still paying off a loan that wasn't for me," I said. "And they just asked me to surrender my wedding day for the person they took that loan out for. I think that's enough." He nodded slowly. "You sure they won't retaliate?" "They won't, because they know I'm right." I was surprised at how steady my voice sounded. I hadn't felt steady all day, but saying it out loud, drawing that line, it gave me back something I hadn't realized I'd lost. The next morning, I texted Mom. "Hey, Mom. Just a heads up, I'll be pausing the monthly transfers starting next month. Mark and I are adjusting our budget before the wedding. Hope that makes sense." She didn't reply right away, but 3 hours later, I got a message from Natalie. All caps. "You're blackmailing them." I put my phone down. Didn't even answer. Some things don't need a reply. Natalie showed up at my apartment 2 days later. No warning. She rang the buzzer 3 times like it was a fire drill, then stood outside my door with her arms folded, sunglasses on, even though it was cloudy. That's Natalie, always ready for a photo that might happen. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "You're unbelievable," she said. "You think this makes you the bigger person, punishing Mom and Dad for helping me?" I didn't answer right away. Just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, matching her posture, but not her drama. "They didn't just help you, Natalie," I said. "They nearly lost the house. And you think your $500 a month is some kind of ransom. I think it was a choice," I said quieter. "One I made, and now I'm making a different one." She huffed, pushed her glasses up on her head. "You're selfish, Hannah." That almost made me laugh. Instead, I said, "Is Adrian still coming to the wedding?" She flinched just for a second. "Why?" "Because if you try to turn my wedding into some kind of stage for your next reinvention, he should probably know what he's walking into." Natalie didn't respond. She just stared at me for a beat, then turned and walked away. Her perfume lingered longer than she did. That night, I got a call from Dad. Frank doesn't call unless someone's dead or the dishwasher broke again, so I picked up right away. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. His voice was lower than usual, like he was still sitting in the garage with the door half open. "I heard you talked to your sister." I didn't say anything. "I also heard about the payments," he added. "Still nothing from me." Then, "You've done more than enough, Hannah. And I mean that. Your mother? She means well, but she gets tunnel vision when it comes to Natalie. Always has." I swallowed. "So what now?" There was a pause, tools clinking in the background. Then he said, "If you need security for the wedding, I'll cover it." That caught me off guard. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said, cutting me off gently. "Not because I'm picking sides, but because you deserve a day that's yours. No noise, no stunts." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I let it out. "Thanks, Dad." "Don't mention it." "Seriously." And Hannah, "Yeah, I'm proud of you. It was such a simple thing to say, and it came from a man who doesn't hand out praise like candy. I didn't cry until after I hung up. Adrian called me that Saturday afternoon. I almost didn't pick up. The number wasn't saved, and after the week I'd had, I was done answering unknowns. But something in me said this won you answer. He introduced himself quickly. Adrian, Natalie's boyfriend. His voice sounded low and tired, like someone who hadn't had a full night's sleep in a while. He said he saw a post online. Natalie had written something about our wedding, something vague and poetic, but apparently she'd been telling people she was doing a surprise performance that day. A reading, maybe even a proposal. He asked me gently if I knew about it. I told him no. Absolutely not. There was a pause, and then he sighed. Said he'd figured as much, and then he told me the rest. That Natalie had been telling him and her friends that he was going to propose at my wedding. That it was all arranged, that our family was on board, that I was sharing my spotlight because I owed her a moment. Except he never said he'd propose. He never planned to. He wasn't even sure the relationship was working anymore, but every time he tried to talk to her, she shifted the conversation, made it about needing the wedding, needing the attention. And that was the word he kept repeating, needing. She's not trying to hurt you, he said, but she's drowning Hannah. She's using anything around her to stay above water. He told me he wouldn't be coming to the wedding, and that he was leaving her. I thanked him, hung up, sat on the couch and stared out the window for a long time. I didn't feel vindicated, just tired. And then, as if the universe had a sense of timing, the phone rang again. Grandma Eleanor. Her voice hadn't changed since I was a kid, tight-clipped, full of judgment, that always sounded like concern if you weren't paying attention. She didn't call to ask how I was. She called to scold, told me Natalie was heartbroken, that I had no compassion, that I was tearing the family apart for one fancy day. She said I was being unfair, cold, difficult, the same words I'd heard a dozen times over the years whenever I tried to speak up. Then she said something I'd heard so often it was like muscle memory. I just don't understand why you're being like this. I remember pressing the phone tighter to my ear and thinking, yes, you do. You've always understood. You just never wanted to admit it. You understood when I got straight A's and you praised Natalie for trying. You understood when I was 12 and she broke my science trophy and you told me not to cry because she didn't mean it. You understood when you pulled me aside the day after her divorce and said, try not to make her feel worse by being too put together. She's known all along, so I said it. I told her, you do understand. You just don't want to admit it. Because if you did, you'd have to face what you've done. There was a pause. No gasp. No apology. Just the old wounded silence of someone who doesn't like being seen too clearly. I didn't wait for more. I ended the call. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel guilty. Just free. I woke up at 5 on the morning of my wedding. Not out of nerves. Not excitement even. Just a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Mark made coffee while I sat at the window watching the trees begin to glow in that early Vermont light. The whole world felt calm, as if it knew I needed a little peace before the day started moving. We'd chosen a small farmstead just outside Burlington. It had trees, a red barn, and a pond that filled up with frogs and lily pads in the summer. More than anything, it felt open, honest. By noon, everything was in place. White chairs lined the grass. Wildflowers marked the aisle. I could hear soft music playing, people arriving, small laughter rolling across the field. I peeked through the barn doors and saw familiar faces. My old roommate from college, my uncle from Maine. Dad standing quietly in the back, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. Then there was a knock at the bridal suite. One of the staff stepped in carefully. "She's here," she said, "with your grandmother." I nodded. I'd been expecting this. Natalie was waiting at the edge of the venue dressed in a long off-white gown, not bridal exactly, but close enough to make a point. She wore a scarf like a sash and held something small in her hand, maybe a note, maybe her phone. Standing beside her was Grandma Eleanor, her expression hard, her posture sharp as ever. I walked toward them slowly, not angry, just clear. Natalie began talking as soon as I got close. Something about a reading, a message of healing, how it would tie into the spirit of the day. But I didn't hear all of it. I was focused on the way her voice tilted like she believed I'd fold the way I always had. I told her no. No performance, no reading, no moment. She blinked at me, thrown off, said she wasn't trying to ruin anything, that it would only take a few minutes. I didn't raise my voice. I just told her that I'd already given enough. This day, this one day, wasn't going to be shared. That's when Eleanor stepped in. She said Natalie had been through a lot, that I could show a little grace. She used the word cruel the way she always had when I didn't give in. I turned to her and said quietly that I wasn't being cruel. I was protecting something. Something I'd never protected before myself. Eleanor looked at me like I was speaking a language she didn't understand. Natalie didn't speak at all. Then I heard Mom's footsteps. Susan walked over slowly but deliberately and stood beside me. She didn't look at Eleanor or Natalie. She looked at me. Then she turned and said what I didn't expect her to say. "That's enough." She said it softly. No anger. Just finality. She told Natalie that this day wasn't hers to bend. That if she couldn't be here as a guest, she shouldn't be here at all. Natalie's face collapsed. Eleanor stepped back like someone had slapped her, and for once no one argued. The 2 security guards I'd hired approached calm and respectful. They didn't need to do anything. Natalie turned and walked away on her own. Eleanor followed, shaking her head. They left quietly, no shouting, no scene. And when they were gone, it felt like the air changed, like we could all finally breathe. Mark appeared beside me as if timed perfectly. He took my hand without saying a word. I looked around at the flowers, the trees, my mother still standing at my side. Dad watching from a distance, eyes full but proud. Mark smiled, ready. I nodded, not just for the ceremony, but for all the quiet that would come after. More than ever, I said, and we walked forward together finally without shadows. We spent the first night of our honeymoon on the coast in a small cottage with creaky floors and windows that let in the sea air. Mark fell asleep early, exhausted from a day of smiling dancing and steering us through something we both knew had been much bigger than just a wedding. I stayed up for a while, just sat on the porch and listened to the ocean. There were no calls, no texts, no drama waiting behind the next notification. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel braced for something. That silence, it was new, but it felt right. A few days later, back home, there was a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was from Natalie. Inside were 3 pages, half apology, half blame. She said she understood why I was hurt, but that I could have handled things differently. She said I had embarrassed her in front of our family, that I had made her feel small. She also said she needed time, that maybe one day we could talk. I didn't reply. I folded the letter once, placed it back in the envelope, and set it aside. A few days after that, Mom sent me an email. She said she had started therapy, that she and Dad were making changes, small ones but real. She told me that seeing me stand up for myself had shaken something loose in her, made her realize how much she'd missed over the years. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said she was sorry, and that she hoped we could stay in each other's lives in whatever way felt healthy. That one I did answer. Just a few lines. I told her I was open to trying, slowly. As for Eleanor, she didn't call, didn't write. I wasn't surprised. Some walls don't fall even when the house around them changes. And honestly, I didn't need her to. What I needed, what I'd always needed, was to feel like I could take up space without having to explain it. One night, a few weeks later, I pulled out our wedding album. Mark had gone to bed early again, and I couldn't sleep. I flipped through the pages slowly. The flowers, the smiles, the golden light caught in hair and lace. Everyone looked like themselves, only a little softer. Then I saw it. One photo. Just me. Standing under the arch mid-laugh. Sunlight catching my shoulder. No one beside me, no one behind me. I wasn't the supporting act. I wasn't waiting for permission. I was centered, and for once I didn't feel the need to shrink.